Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Molnar, and I'm the Chief Compliance Officer at Western Union. And I thought what I'd talk to you about today a little bit is not really the technology piece of it, but more the conceptual, fundamental tenets that you need to run your compliance program. But although it sounds simple, we all know the technology behind it is very complex. So I just have a quick video for you. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to deliver services in a compliant but frictionless manner. So all of this that goes on in the sausage-making factory in the background is something that should appear on the front, seamless, smooth, and compliant, and deliver what you need to your regulators. So what does it mean to be compliant? Well, the way that I've started to view it over the years is, let's not forget what incepted all of the strict rules and regulations that we all have to comply with, whether we're in payments, money movement, of money transfer, paying bills, if you are sending information through blockchain, cryptocurrency, whatever the case may be. Our effort has to be toward keeping what we call the bad guys out. All of this incepted because of things like 9/11. So don't forget that that's the fundamental purpose. We're trying to protect our customers, protect our companies, and protect national security, and in fact, work with law enforcement to help keep this stuff not only out of our institutions, but ideally out of the industries altogether. So real risk, bad guys, fraud, terrorist financing, money laundering. That's the real risk of your services being used for illicit purposes. What does that lead to? Regulatory risk, obviously. And we've seen a lot of cease and desist orders all over the world, businesses being ordered not to grow. We're seeing an increase in personal liability. So you want to stay out of this. And then, of course, the inevitable reputational risk that can do two things. It can drive customers away, but it can also drive investors away. Not good for anyone. So the right mindset, the way that I like to think about it is, think of compliance as an enabler. Be at the table early, be at the table often, and your job is to help the business move forward in a compliant fashion to protect itself. You're a business partner, not the enemy. An innovator, co-inventing technologies and products that are compliant to keep the company safe. And what's old is new again. What we're seeing is a movement to the 3 lines of defense, where the business unit is really in the best position of anyone at the company to ensure that your customers, your agents, your financial institutions, your vendors, whoever it might be, they're in the best position to assess when you're bringing on who's a good customer and who's not, and to put in all the controls in place. And then the oversight functions, compliance, finance, legal, risk, really being an overseer and an advisor. And then, of course, the independent assurance. I was just looking at the metrics for my own company before I left. We had 300 regulatory exams and audits in the last 3 years. 300, about 100 per year. Now, we're in 200 countries and jurisdictions around the world, including regulated by all 50 states in the United States. So the regulatory burden might be less depending on your footprint, but I would say that no matter what size you are, learn to love the audits. Learn to love the regulators. Be their partner. Set up a department within your company that is all they do. They respond to audits. They respond to regulations. They love it. It's their day job. It's not something they do off the side of their desk. So a wonderful colleague of mine came up with this analogy or hypothetical. So just take it with a grain of salt, but this I thought was a great way to explain it. So we're in a car, and the business is in the driver's seat. Compliance is in the passenger seat. Now, this slide could be wrong, depending on what side of the road you typically drive on, but business in the driver's seat, compliance in the passenger seat. So what has your trusty compliance officer done for you? Well, they have looked at the rules of the road, done all the research about the speed limit. They've determined whether the car is fit for purpose. They may have even helped you buy it. They may have helped you order it in the first place. And now the car comes, you've had all the advice you need, and you're the driver, you're the business, you're behind the wheel. And your compliance officer has told you that the speed limit is 100 kilometers per hour. But you decide you're going to drive 120. And you're both sitting there in the car. When you get pulled over, whose ticket is that? It's the driver's ticket. It's the company's ticket. And what we're seeing is businesses being held responsible, even with respect to personal liability. But remember, we're in the car with you, and in some places, there actually isn't a speed limit. It's drive with reasonable due care, just like some of the regulations. Know your customers, know your agents, put in a good risk-based program. Well, what does that mean? Well, you have to judge that for yourself. Programs have to be very bespoke. You need to know your own risks and know how to mitigate them. So it might be, if you're really driving toward that financial target, in some instances it could be okay to do 150K. Could be okay. But depending on the traffic and the road conditions and the winds and so forth, that might be a very reckless thing to do. And then the car crashes. We both get hurt. It's not good for anybody. So we like to use the car analogy, but the primary message here is compliance is the business of the entire company. It's got to be embedded in the DNA of your company from the moment you order that car you bring on that customer. So compliance is the advisor, the subject matter expert. Now, there are some nuances here. In some companies, compliance does retain some of the first-line defense. Can we interdict? Can we close a company down? Can we make judgments on our own? That's up to you. In some companies, that's exactly what they do. And I would say in ours, at least 25% to 50% of what I do is still a first-line responsibility, but most of it is moving towards second line. So it's been a bit of a pendulum swing. Only maybe 3 or 4 years ago, regulators were ordering, if anything has anything to do with compliance, it must be in the compliance department. And I think we've all been there. The company that I'm at, we have 10,000 FTE and about 10,000 temporary support persons, and 2,500 of the FTE are in the compliance department. 2,500, 1/4 of our FTE. Now, the reason for that is the company that I'm at, Western Union, we work through an agency model, and we have in excess of 550,000 locations. Last time I looked, I think Starbucks, or rather McDonald's, were both around the 30 to 40,000 location. We have 550,000 locations. And literally 1 to 2 million active frontline associates or FLAs. So again, you have to mitigate your risk. I'm responsible for the conduct of those FLAs at all of our agents. And so with everything in compliance, it becomes, after time, a little bit unsustainable. And the other unintended consequence of ordering all compliance activities into compliance is what you've heard in some recent cases, if you've read them, the notion of abdication of the first line of response duties to compliance from the business. And we've seen, you can't just say, well, it's in compliance, it's not my problem. In order to protect yourself and protect your company, it's really important to make sure that as that pendulum comes back, you protect your officers and your directors and make sure your board is safe and secure. And the way you do that is empower them and train them and give them responsibilities and tools to carry those out. The other thing, of course, that we're seeing is the incredible risk extraterritorial jurisdiction taken primarily by the US regulators all over the world, including of individuals. Personal liability, we're seeing this more in Europe as well. All you need to do is have a transaction ping off a data center. And you've read the recent cases where boards have been refreshed, clawbacks have been exercised, business people have been taken out of companies. We see regulators almost disbarring people from the industry, which of course is not where you want to be. And that's very chilling. But if you come to it with this mindset of being an enabler and a partner and you're at the table early, you can prevent these things to a large degree. So we talked a lot about the risks. What about the rewards? Well, what I've found is that if you have an extraordinary compliance program, you are a very attractive partner. Joint ventures, M&A activity, customers want to come where they feel safe and secure. They're not going to be defrauded. You have less regulatory issues. You're able to grow. So it's truly an enabler and a competitive advantage. And the best part that I like about it is swinging full circle to where we started. What's the purpose of compliance? It's keeping the bad guys out. It's trying to disrupt that activity. Maybe even extinguish it. Maybe even smother it altogether. And this is a favorite part of my job, but just recently we were working with law enforcement here in Europe and found an entire child exploitation ring where children were being exploited all throughout various countries in Europe, traveled from one to another. We identified that by following the money, interrogated it with sophisticated analytics, identified the typology. We were able to find those bad actors, file, according to law, appropriate regulatory reports, and then swear out affidavits, arrest warrants, and I'm pleased to say that 15 individuals are now in prison for 15 years. So that's completely eradicating that activity. So you're an enabler, you're a partner, you're an advisor, you're doing a great thing for your company, a great thing for your customers, and a great thing for the globe. Thank you.